This episode of Bonfireside Chat is brought to you by our Patreon backers and my NPR voice. Go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
A corpse should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will cure you now. Liberate you from your wild curiosity.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And my name is Joshua Garrity.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a darkly scientific favorite, a favorite of the black sciences.
Yes, and this week we are talking about the Research Hall, continuing our discussion of the Bloodborne Old Hunters DLC. And as you heard, we're joined by Josh, who is perhaps best known to podcast listeners as a contributor to the Kane and Rince podcast.
Yes.
Hey, Josh.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of this podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure to be invited on.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to get you on earlier in the show, and it just kind of didn't work out. So I knew when the DLCs came out, I was kind of hoping that we'd get at least 3 episodes out of it, and we did. So we were able to get in some guests that we hadn't had before. I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
Can you kind of speak a little bit to what you do on Kane and Rince, and then also kind of how you came to the Souls and what your relationship is with the series?
Yeah, sure. So Kane and Rince is, I suppose, kind of similar to the Watch Out for Fireballs podcast that you two do, in that we take a game and examine it in detail. We're structurally a bit different. You guys kind of go through the game chronologically, where we tend to kind of examine pieces of the game on their own, like the gameplay or the story or what have you. And we also have the advantage of having 10 members for the podcast, so we have like a rotating host structure, which allows people to come in and out of podcasts as needs be. But yeah, so how did I come to the Souls series? I'm pretty late to the Souls bandwagon. I didn't play Dark Souls until properly. I didn't play Dark Souls properly until 2013. I bounced off of it several times for whatever reason. It's the same story everyone has. Like, the early section kind of was a bit baffling to me, having not experienced a game like this before. But then it took my fellow Kane and Rince member, James Carter, to kind of guide me through the early section and explain what humanity was and stuff like that. And then after that, the lore really drew me in, and I realized, kind of as everyone realizes, that the difficulty is kind of like the most surface level detail about these games, that actually there's so much more here that's of interest. The characters are rich, and the worlds they create are so full of meaning and symbolism. And then, yeah, from that point on, I've loved these games.
Yeah, it's if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to Kane and Rince, especially if you like Watch Out for Fireballs, I would recommend it. It's a similar thing where you choose a game that you are predisposed to like, but you can also get the experience of kind of choosing a game that you haven't that you don't have any experience with. So like I listened to the episode on Sensible Soccer. And that thing, because that's a series that I just thought was funny because of the name. I always thought that was really funny, but it has kind of more cultural cachet in other parts of the world, and I learned a lot about it without, kind of playing an old game that doesn't have nostalgic value for me. That was kind of a curiosity. So it kind of gives that same kind of service. And yeah, recommend it. It's super cool.
Yeah, and the number of different perspectives on it really cover a lot of the angles. So it seems like people naturally fall into just kind of talking about what they like about it, which kind of covers all the gaps. So it's a very well put together, very comprehensive look at these things.
Yeah, and if you like this show, you could also our buddy CJ has guested on a couple of different episodes, so you can find one with CJ on it if you can't get enough of CJ's voice, which I know I can't. But yeah, it's super cool to have you on here, and it's good. I'm glad that you ended up landing in the series and it welcomed you to the fold, because it's a good fold. Welcome to the good fold.
Oh, please let that be a location name in Dark Souls 3.
The good fold.
Yep.
Oh God, my imagination's creating horrors.
I know, right?
It's grossing me out pretty good. Fold. I don't know what it is when you say fold that makes me think flesh as opposed to laundry. Yep. Probably because I'm a slob. But that's not what you do with laundry. You just stick it in a drawer. And then, but skin, that gets folded.
Yep. Oh, do you want me to tell you what we did last time?
Please.
Yeah. So
Old man Buttercup.
So last time we found this strange eye in the hunter's dream, and an amygdala brought us into the hunter's nightmare, where apparently we're able to travel into the past to learn kind of what's happened to the hunter's side of the church and the different social structures that we've kind of seen in the main game. So after killing Ludwig the Accursed, or sorry, Ludwig the Holy Blade, nay Accursed.
Nay.
Oh, I didn't realize how appropriate that was. Neat. I'm going off the dome. Usually I write these, but I had no time. We discovered the underbelly of this huge cathedral, and we're starting out in these cells in this dank basement adjacent to the corpse pile.
Yeah. Yep, just west of the corpse pile.
Within walking distance
is the old jail.
Easy transit to the River of Blood.
Yeah, it is nice for the gondola of sorrow.
Yeah.
So you end up in this little jail part, which is it's interesting, the idea that these, we brought it up in the last episode how these church giants were kind of guarding the back entrance to this. Is that what you guys think that Ludwig is doing? Is he guarding the jail? And from which direction? Like, is he stopping people from getting in or stopping people from getting out? Or is he interred there? And what do you guys think? Why is he here?
I don't think Ludwig is lucid enough in the state that we find him in to be guarding anything. I think he is just kind of rampaging where he is. I'm not sure if there is, apart from like the big kind of giants holding the cannons outside of Ludwig's arena. I can't think of anything really guarding this area apart from those two.
Yeah, the fact that this is right next to the jail and that none of the exits are big enough for Ludwig to get out of. And there's text in, I believe it's the key that gets you into some of the cells, that this jail specifically is a place where the powers that be kind of hid problematic hunters in order to suppress information. So I could totally see Ludwig being there as both his punishment and kind of a convenient way to keep people in and out.
Yeah. I just had this thought of, because we didn't really discuss what he was doing here in the last episode, and that's because we didn't really talk about what here was. It was just the corpse pile. But I like this idea of him kind of being put there like a ship in a bottle. Like he's too big to get out, but he's been kind of grown there like a bonsai, like a Shetland in a bottle or something.
When the bonsai comes later.
Yes. So this little jail area is definitely guarded and kind of patrolled when you get here. And there are multiple different cells and they're occupied. So this is a very high density of NPCs for this game.
To your left, there's a hunter in a cell who is slamming his head against a wall, which we're going to see a lot. That is the universal kind of gesture for "I've lost my mind."
The Rydell shuffle.
Yeah. Come on, guys, let's do the Rydell shuffle. And he's kind of saying this prayer or this incantation that is kind of lifting up the hunters, talking about how they are always clear of mind, how beasts are a curse and a curse is a shackle, but we are the true blades. And we don't have the key to learn who this guy is right now. That'll come later, but it definitely provides a very creepy soundtrack to this whole place.
Always clear of mind, for sure. The church attendant that's down here and the sniper, the wheelchair guy, are tougher than versions of these we've seen before, and killed me, which is a really rude awakening right after a boss fight. But I definitely underestimated them and got kind of stun locked.
Yeah.
And one of the few non-boss deaths I've had in the DLC. But that's this is definitely they're keeping people in. It is well guarded, even though some of the cells are just straight up open. Because we also run into one of my favorite little side characters here is this the body of Gradia, with the fist of Gradia, which reminds me of like the legendary Big M lorelet in Demon Souls as well.
Yeah.
We're going to see a couple different Demon Souls references in this section, but so there's this hunched over giant woman who has a weapon, for people who kind of eschewed mechanical fiddliness of guns and instead, decide to use their fist. Have either of you guys messed around with this weapon at all?
No, unfortunately. It just, I love the sound of it, and I love that it exists, but it plays so counter to my style of play that I can't imagine finding a use for it.
We're reading about it. It seems like it is meant to like break super armor. So like if an enemy has kind of mega poise, a couple hits from this, like it does the most poise damage, or some of the most poise damage you can do. So it's kind of interesting. Like one of the themes ludically of the DLC is opening up these new ways to play and answering that criticism. And I like this as a nod to that.
Definitely. Her unrelenting pummeling appeared oddly heroic. which is wonderful. Also, the idea that she was named Simple Gratia.
Yeah, I like that detail.
Just tons of character for this for this person that we find. Like she has met a terrible fate down here. There's another NPC who I really think we should talk about him more later, because
I think so too.
Yeah, because he's involved in the end of one of the long-running NPC quest lines in the DLC. But you find another person who is lucid behind a door who asks you if you can hear a bell, and there is no bell that you can hear anyway.
With what we learn later, that's really ominous and great.
Yep.
Like that's super cool. Yeah. Like Brador, his name is Brador, and we'll talk about it in the next episode, but Brador owns. So, and the same reason why we didn't talk about Lawrence when we first ran into him. Like, yes, you can fight him, but you need stuff from later. And that kind of ties into the weird chronological structure of the DLC. Yeah. And how it's kind of reversed. But you come up from this jail into a secret passage that's really similar to the secret passage in the chapel that is not the Erden Chapel, the one where you first meet Alfred.
Yeah, the one that leads you to Old Yharnam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the small church. Yeah.
To this kind of MASH scene.
It looks like the cathedral levels from World War I in Eternal Darkness, actually.
Oh yeah.
It's this gigantic sanctuary in a cathedral, and they have these kind of canopy beds set up. It's almost like the Little Sisters of Illyria, like the Dark Tower short story, where they've got these transfusion bottles there, but most of these beds are empty. But this is a hospital this is a church turned hospital, and it's like a rebus of what the church does. Yeah.
The first thing I noticed when coming into this area was those glowing eyes behind me, and for a split second, I don't know why, but I immediately thought, have they actually put basilisks in this game?
I think that's intentional. Like I had the same thing. It's the spacing. Yeah. So the spacing on the eyes is very similar, if not exactly the same.
And the fact that they're kind of luminescent.
Yeah. Can you imagine like the shitstorm if they started just adding Dark Souls monsters into the DLC? Like people like that would be incredible. What if Ornstein was up here? Can you just imagine every single person who hated Dark Souls 2 and loved Bloodborne in spite of it just like freaking out? I wish I could ROM hack it. Like I understand it's not a ROM, but like that'd be amazing. Old Dragon Slayer just shows up in the church and just like, oh well,
there have been no dragons so far.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he did a pretty good job, didn't he?
Yeah. And now he's here to fight you.
I run out of dragons. Now I hunt werewolves. What do you want from me?
Man's got to eat.
Yeah, it's a tough economy. Yeah. That would have been good.
Oh man, but these rats, they don't serve any purpose, really. They're just rats, and they're meant to look weird, and I can only assume that is a feint, that they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I think it's just supposed to be unnerving.
Yeah.
Or they're used for like corpse disposal or something like that.
Oh, like the pigs? Yeah.
Like you just when somebody dies on the operating table, you just wheel them over into the darkness.
Yeah, then... that must be a late development, because they really haven't cared what happens to the corpses up till now.
I guess that's true.
But yeah, back there you can find a blood chunk, which we didn't really talk about in the previous episode, but this DLC is a great place to go to get upgrade materials. Not just new weapons, but also like they're trying to speed your progress towards getting some of these weapons usable at the high level they assume you need to be.
Yeah. Let's talk about the lady here.
Mm-hmm.
The
So, does she have a name? I forget.
So the people, so the popular kind of lore supposition is this is Amelia. Yeah.
Oh.
You sent Amelia here after killing her beast form, because the prayer she's saying is the same one Amelia says in the cutscene.
Okay.
So I'll buy it.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Sure, she's featured very prominently in some of the art in the guide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what do you think of that, Josh? Like, does that hold water for you?
Yeah, I mean, she's wearing the same clothes. She's saying the same thing. I don't think that's an unfair assumption to make. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure. The one thing that I'm still a little bit hazy about with this DLC is kind of the rules about who comes into this dream, as it were, this nightmare, and who doesn't. Because at first it feels like it's just a prison for hunters, but then Amelia's here, so I'm not entirely sure why she's here, because she's not a hunter. So I don't know if you guys have figured that out in your own heads about maybe why she's here.
No, it's a larger kind of point too about like who shows up and
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that the curse is kind of extended to people who were involved in the church.
Yeah, anybody who was complicit.
Right,
yeah. But then why isn't Willem here?
Yeah. Well, Willem's not necessarily dead by the time you get here, whereas Amelia is.
There we go.
So that could make the sense, but it is weird the way that so people die and they get sent here, but then some of them can be summoned, afterwards.
Yeah.
So like somebody wrote in on Facebook, and I apologize, this will do proper kind of credit. A couple of people wrote in about this though, or talked to me about this, but how you can summon Henrik.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the game after he's dead. So the idea being that maybe you summon him from the hunter's nightmare, but Henrik, thought he didn't dream anymore. It was like, so when people, Eileen and the like, are they actually out of the woods, or are they, they no longer dream, but when they actually die, they're going to go to the hunter's nightmare? Is it darker than we originally thought?
Yeah.
I don't actually know the rules for it.
I'm also curious why she's human when so many other people who were presumably slain in the real world and then kind of manifest here are beasts like Lawrence and Ludwig.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to find out why that's the case. Maybe she kind of was projecting herself into the nightmare just before you kind of stumble upon her and kill her. I'm not sure, but
I mean, so does it have to do? So there's a description on an item that we're going to get here very soon, like on the altar that she's guarding. If you raise the elevator, and go beneath it, you can actually find Lawrence's skull.
Yeah.
Which I need to pull up its description here, but that is probably some of the only detail that we get about the ways that different people manifest in one way or another, because it alludes to the idea that Lawrence's human skull only exists within the nightmare, when in reality he became the first cleric beast. Now I can't reconcile that with the way that time flows in this. What exists as a symbol of the past and what they failed to protect, as this says, and what is just kind of a little bit of kind of a nod. It feels satisfying for this person to be Amelia. I hadn't noticed that before, but I cannot for the life of me actually give a one sentence description of why that's plausible.
I do wonder whether the time period at which different pieces of this nightmare are set kind of affects how people manifest. So presumably Amelia is in a part of the nightmare that exists before the Scourge of Beasts. So maybe that's the reason why she's allowed to kind of maintain a human form rather than a beast form or something like that. And that would kind of make sense in the case of Ludwig and Lawrence then, because they're both in the more recent history part of the nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely, this is just me kind of saying stuff off the top of my head, but that's something I definitely want to see the lore hounds kind of explore more.
There's also like a real obvious gameplay explanation, which would be you couldn't have another boss fight this soon after.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, as much as people, and we're complicit in this too, so I'm not putting anybody on blast, but people who, get really up their own asses with the lore in this game, again, including us, who do that, are never want to ascribe something to a gameplay concession. Like it always has to have a deep lore explanation. But I think that sometimes there probably are just gameplay reasons. And this could be one of those.
Sometimes a lady who wants to kill you is just a lady who wants to kill you.
Exactly. And sometimes she's just smoking a dick, and it's just a dick. Or a cigar or whatever. It's a dream, so it could be. But it is. So it could just be that, because a hunter fight right after Ludwig feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. I found her friend more challenging than her. Just because of the nature of the environment you have to fight both of them in. Because I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but I often get caught on objects when I'm dodging, and because that room is full of these beds, while I'm trying to dodge these magic bolts and this person coming at me with their massive sword, I just get stuck and whatever reason get stun locked and what have you. So what I ended up doing was kind of drawing her friend down into the prison area, because for whatever reason Amelia doesn't follow us down there, and I managed to take her out separately there and then go up and face Amelia. And actually she wasn't that challenging, which I was a bit surprised about, because usually I struggle with magic users. For whatever reason, I'm not really equipped to deal with those kind of abilities. But yeah, I didn't really have much of an issue with Amelia once I got her isolated.
Yeah, I ended up definitely drawing them down into the stairwell as well.
Yeah. So her friend is definitely difficult for me because of the way that they attack. You can't really aggro just one of them. Her friend is kind of hiding off behind a column to the side, like in a real, like, cartoonishly sneaky, like, I'm hiding kind of pose. So it's very hard to kind of fight each of them on their own terms.
Let's talk about this altar.
Yeah.
The surgery altar, which is this is maybe my favorite piece of statuary in Bloodborne. And this is a game that, like, the statuary is off the fucking chain.
Yeah.
Like, that should be on the back of the box. Like, if you like statuary, you will like this game. And, like, this is good statuary. because there's like a lot of detail. Like first, like the really tall figures with the bell of the book and the mitre. That's really evocative and great. And then you're putting an eyeball pendant into a skull. You're putting eyes on the inside, to do it. And then you don't have it in the notes. Did you notice the little beastie? Cool.
No, I didn't.
From under the gurney is a little werewolf peeking out.
Oh, that's adorable. Look at the little guy.
It is actually pretty cute. Like it is like a miniature pup. It is Pupper. It is why he's so small. But so it's this weird, like awesome little summation, this little of what's happening, with the church.
Yeah, it's funny that there's no explicit like violence in the statuary. Like that's not a part of the story. Like the beastie is poking out there, but for an organization that kind of relied on the hunters, if you take this as like their way of communicating their story to the people who are coming to them for help, it kind of implies that the hunters are not really a public facing side of this until shit starts kind of going off, like well after they would be making statuary to exalt themselves.
Which is I'm sorry to cut you off just real quick that's explicit. The idea that the secret hunter shows up when we learn more about Simon.
Yep.
So like that's actually like in the text too. So
but it's wonderful that is kind of told here as well. It's supported.
Yeah, this is the propaganda. This is the public facing thing. If you go to the hospital and want these people's health, like it's it's a surgery by people of power who are kind of stately and have dignity, even though they the little beasties there, which is kind of the shadow over things. But I like that a lot. What were you saying, Josh? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no problem. It kind of links to what you were saying as well about propaganda. I like that the beast is kind of small but under the table, because I think it speaks to the way the church wants the public to see the Scourge of Beasts as this threat that people should be worried about. But we've got it under control. It's this small little thing that, we'll handle it.
And side effect.
Just the arrogance of this organization that it could just desperately try to convince people that there's that problem, but it's all under control. It's fine. Don't worry, guys.
You just give him a link of cartoon sausages, and he's happy. You just throw some cartoon sausage links down under the table, and keeps the beast away.
Give him some belly rubs. It's fine.
Yeah. Scratch his ears.
Yeah, if he starts going at your leg, here's a tip: just let him finish.
That's the worst tip, Cole.
Yeah, that's Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, I know, but it still remains one of the most biggest piece of anti-advice I can think of. Like, the shin hatred, the kind of shin hatred you'd have to allow a dog to make love to your shin to completion, like. Not okay. I like dogs now, so
but I also love the mixture of materials here too. Like this is, if you broke it down to its constituent parts, it would be one of the most valuable things in the world that we've seen so far, because it is nothing but gold and silver and marble. Yeah. No, this is this altar is great. I'm not sure who the body on the bed is supposed to represent. If this is just the populace of Yarnum or whatnot. But
I think it's just a patient. Like his face is covered, which makes me think like that grants kind of an everyman quality to him.
Yeah.
Also, you don't have to look him in the eye as you like stick an eyeball into his brain.
Yeah. There's a trick to this, like we alluded to. You can run onto this and it will raise you up to the next area. However, if you jump off of it and check and see what's below it, there's another altar down there, which I didn't really notice anything too notable about its design, but that's where you get Lawrence's skull.
The one thing I noticed about that is the statue on the under altar is missing its head. So it's a headless statue, which kind of makes sense. Also, Lawrence's skull is wearing a really, really awesome like emo scarf. Like he looks like he's in Belle and Sebastian. Like it's really stylish. Like it's the Harold and Maude scarf.
Yeah. And we already talked about this skull. This is what you get. This is what gets you the optional boss fight in this DLC, but that makes sense to talk about later.
Yeah, it's hard. So if you head up, though, you actually get to the research hall, which is a really, really striking first impression, at least for me, when you first see this.
Definitely. It even the landing area feels like Latria. It feels like 3-2. And you step out and you look at this kind of crisscross of stairways. And it immediately, for me, evokes Duke's Archives as well. And it's like they decided to concentrate all the things I love in one place. Well, what was your first kind of take on this, Josh?
I think I was struck first by the enemy designs in this area, mainly because how they mix up kind of passive and aggressive enemies, even though they look identical. And that added a layer of fear that I hadn't encountered in Bloodborne before, where I would approach an enemy not entirely sure how it was going to react. Me being so into the story, I don't want to miss any, key dialogue. So I approached not every one of them. Obviously, after a while, you kind of guess. But at first, I was kind of nervous approaching these guys because I don't want to accidentally, kill a guy, another one that's trying to just find its eyes or what have you. That really struck me as an interesting design choice to kind of throw the player off like that with enemies and NPCs that look identical.
Yeah, all of the enemies that you encounter here are kind of this same type. These patients, and there are a couple of doctors spread throughout here, but they're all in kind of different levels of this transformation that they're undergoing. And enemies have talked to us before. The opening run up of this game is like Resident Evil. They will shout at you and swear at you as they attack you, but that feels different compared to these people who, when they're lucid, they are saying some very heart-wrenching things, or it's very clear that they that their mind has gone someplace where they're not quite aware of their situation.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, the Duke comparison, is when you read in interviews that the big inspiration for Duke's Archives was the school, it was Hogwarts. And I think this is a better realization of that. That kind of like specific, like it's, and because like, I like, I actively like the Harry Potter movies and like the books. So seeing something that is like, I associate with this like kind of like comfort and winter whimsy, and being so kind of unnerving is really great. And not, when Josh, you mentioned the person who can't find their eyes, like the person kind of rooting around looking for their eyes. Where have we seen that before? Like that's like a pop culture thing, like somebody digging around trying to find their eyes with their hands.
Velma trying to find her glasses.
I don't think that's what I was referring to. Velma, was that Scooby-Doo?
Yep.
You're talking Scooby-Doo? No, I definitely wasn't referencing Scooby-Doo. Or Scoober-Doo. The
Scooby theme Husker Du cover band.
Yes. Husker Du. It wasn't that. I feel like there's like a trope of somebody like digging around, reaching for their eyes in like a pile of rubble or something like that in some piece of fiction. If anybody knows what I'm thinking of, let me know. Yeah. Hit me up on the Twitter. But that's a really, really creepy thing. They're weird, like bag head, like her, her like if you look at the texture of these things' heads, it looks like burlap.
Yeah.
It's really strange, like a thick leather. Just super, super unnerving.
Yeah, and how calm her vocal delivery is as well is unnerving. She's looking for her eyes, and she's just like, "Yeah, I'm looking for my eyes. Have you seen them?" I always find that kind of contrast between something horrific and the subject of that horror being completely okay and calm, just a really horrifying image whenever I stumble across it, and this is a really effective example of that.
I've never lost anything and been as calm as she is about losing her eyes. Like if I lose my comb or something like that, like I am more stressed out than she is about losing her eyes.
and she's lost them, but her final line there is, "Everything is pale now."
Yeah.
And all these people, even though they are kind of shedding these these senses that they otherwise would have, they're being replaced with, input from beyond.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The sounds of the ocean.
This is kind of our first indication of that, as she is kind of scrounging in this blue pool that has bodies in it, like it poisons you. And it's funny that this is also where you can find some blue elixir. Which, is this where the blue elixir comes from? Is that what I'm drinking?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
for sure. I almost never use the blue elixir, even though I read that it's handy in this part of the game. But yeah, that would make a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you head up the stairs and you run into these new enemies, the patients here, who are kind of like standard, Soulsborne mobs. They have a really long combo, like they're running flailing combo. If the first hit hits you, you're likely to get stun locked, and that can do a lot of damage.
That's a lot of trouble, especially because of the numbers and because you're mostly going to be fighting them on staircases and on these kind of narrow balconies.
Yeah. In general, the way that we're going to kind of tackle this, like this area is one, the way it's laid out is you're constantly doubling back on yourself and kind of opening up new paths. Two, it's impossible to do twice. Like I went and tried to replay it to refresh my memory for the show. And after you've gone through and flipped all the switches for this, there's really no way to experience this in the proper order and the way that you do the first time around. New enemies populate different areas and new pathways open up. So, forgive me if my memory's a little bit fuzzy, but we're going to kind of hit highlights and set pieces as per usual with, maze-like areas.
Yeah, and I've kind of grouped these roughly as you are ascending, but this is it is resistant to our normal approach because it is nonlinear to a certain extent, and because it has a little bit of the water level problem of kind of these big environmental changes that affect your ability to get to different places, even though they look functionally kind of pretty similar. But you have two different kinds of rooms broadly: these laboratories and these patient rooms.
Yep. Yeah, let's talk about the floor 3 labs that we can find.
Yeah. So you're given two options to either go up to floor 2 or up to floor 3. And I'm just picking this because this gets us to a pretty good place. You're introduced when you're walking on these balconies, and this really tripped me up because these are deadly traps. There's a pressure panel that causes these vials of acid to explode off of shelves, which seems really ill-advised.
Yeah. It's really gamey. Like that's a really gamey trap for the research hall. They have. But every time it happened, it startled me. Like eventually I just stopped walking in front of shelves if I could avoid it, or rolling past shelves. But the fact that this is a creepy area and I was already kind of creeped out, having those explosions of glass kind of shatter behind me, did a really good job of making me kind of jump. What's
funny is it doesn't happen immediately. The switch will be 2 tomba widths away from one of the bookshelves, so you'll be running along a click and like, wait a minute, what happens? And then the acid in your face. But yeah, that does a large amount of damage as you are seeing more of these non-aggressive patient enemies, and one of them is asking for Maria to save her because she cannot hear anything.
Yes. And we're going to meet Maria soon. There are also guys in wheelchairs inside the rooms who are kind of hunched over patients who are on gurneys that like don't look like, they look like they were caught in like an explosion in
those fucking acid bottles.
Yeah, it doesn't, like, there's nothing constructive that's being done with them. Like they're just dartboards. Like it's just stick every scalpel and scissors into their face. Like they're examples from the mob or something. Like, they should have a note pinned to their lapel that just says "closed casket," and like,
especially those ones that are covered, but they're still pinioned with surgical implements. Yeah. And these, we know that these are doctors because they're wearing plague doctor masks, which is shorthand for Victorian times.
Yes, and creepy steampunk fun.
Yep. Oh man, there's some elevators here, but really, what is kind of centerpiece for this, for me at least, kind of maybe emotionally or at least narratively, is there's an elevator down to this woman who, she doesn't give you her name immediately, but she wants you to bring her some brain fluid.
Yep, murky mushy brain fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Plip plop. And she's kind of like the defining NPC of this area.
Mm-hmm.
So we could probably talk about her a little bit, even though her storyline comes up a little bit later.
Yeah.
Right. So is it Adele?
Yes.
Is that her name? Yeah. So she's Adele, and she is a blood saint, similar to the other characters who can give us their blood. And she can give you her mega healing blood as well.
That's Adeline. Sorry, it's Adeline. Adele's another NPC. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I said
this
yes
is Adeline here?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I get there are a lot of A names in there. And she has one of the most irritating, non-intuitive side quests in the game.
Yep.
That I definitely didn't figure out without a guide, and was really annoyed when I figured out what the solution was.
Did you have trouble with this, Josh?
I did, I have to admit, but that said, I did enjoy kind of going through this side quest, just because I think some of the best writing in the DLC is the dialogue from the various heads that you find around this area, and from Adeline herself. Just the way they describe what is essentially enlightenment as this kind of liquid kind of pulsing through them. It creates so many images in my mind, the way they describe it. And yeah, I was just really impressed with the dialogue here. And the kind of the idea of the brain fluid as well. Looking at the image, it kind of looks like frog spawn or something like that. Yeah. And I kind of wondered whether like it was like a birthing liquid for eyes in the inside or something like that. Like they're like tiny little eyes growing in this frog spawn thing that kind of sprout and become big eyes later on. I agree that the side quest is a little obtuse, but I think it's worth doing regardless.
Oh, definitely. So it is confirmed in the text. The brain fluid is the beginnings of these right. Internal eyes, and just the idea being, we're led to believe that the church is performing these experiments on these people, expanding their brains until that's all they are, in order to kind of harvest this precursor to the eyes, which is what they are kind of short-sightedly after.
Yeah. I love the idea of it growing like a fungus bed. It's like you want to start a kombucha at your house or something like that, and you have to get which is a shitter. I could have just said you want to drink some kombucha at your house, and I should have had the exact same reaction. But like the way you have to get that like starter fungus, like a starter culture to make this. Like I love that idea. I definitely think the quest is worth doing and is full of like evocative, awesome creepiness.
Yeah. I love, so we talked in the first episode about kind of the poetic nature of a lot of the dialogue here, the way that it rhymes and the way that it kind of comes across like a nursery.
Children's.
Yeah, exactly. And that childlike aspect is really laid out here, because the head creatures that we find, I don't know if they've regressed or if these were children to begin with, but the fact that they're all kind of going plip plop, they are mimicking the sound of the ocean and the sound of the water that they are experiencing. They've gone beyond being afraid of it, like the people who are not as transformed are, to kind of like singing along with it.
Yeah, I don't think they're children. I think that it's actually because we run into the headless patients later. I think that what happens is eventually your head can just kind of live as its own organism.
Oh, and we can see that because they grow tentacles and stuff.
Yeah, so your body continues on, but its adult heads are kind of divorced from this bodily thing and this bodily desires, and are just purely in touch with the ocean, in touch with this kind of enlightenment. I really love the way that her side quest articulates, and we don't have all the parts to it, but we can just talk about it now, so we're not constantly doubling back to her. Is finding these just kind of spare heads around, and they are innocent and childlike and kind of helpless, but you have to kill them to get their brain fluid.
Don't worry, they come back. You're just juicing them.
Yeah. Kill the juices loose. So, and the way that this, I mean, if you wanted to argue that this side quest is fair, the way you'd argue it is to say that you notice that they come back. Because there's only 2 of them. You can give her 2 brain fluids. After you juice them, they don't give you any more fluid. So you actually have to kill Adeline to get the brain fluid that she already drank to feed her in this kind of, this never-ending machine.
One deviled egg, the same deviled egg. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that guy from the Civil War who had the hole in his stomach. It's like that.
Or that cow at some of those colleges.
Yeah. So I think my mission before I die to kill all those cows and put them out of their misery. Like all the science cows have to, they deserve a piece of rest. But that's how you get the 3rd brain fluid to give to her to get the milkweed rune, which is awesome because as we talked about how Bloodborne doesn't have as many ways to play it, this is as drastic. There's like 2 very drastic changes in playstyle that come with the DLC, and this is one of them. If you use a weapon that we'll talk about later and put this rune on, you become like a milkweed creature or a lumen flower tree, which is this broccoli tentacle beast thing.
Yeah,
that we'll talk about more when you get the weapon for it. But it is a really cool, it's a really obtuse side quest that has a really significant reward gameplay wise.
Yeah, and this rune, if you look at it, it kind of bears the appearance of the initials HP.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a reference to Hewlett Packard.
Yep.
And the way that you print out some Eldritch Abominations and play with papercraft because you're a kid. The
phantasms guide us and lead us to further discoveries. So these lumen woods are kind of used again as the fungal bed for these to grow these living creatures.
Yeah.
Another item that she gives you is the balcony key, and I'm sure we'll get into the details of that area later on. But what I really like about this item is, the text with it, where it talks about how Maria gave it to her because she thought she might like, the breeze and the flowers outside, but she can't comprehend why Maria would give her this item. And it speaks to how her perception is so much grander, and she's able to comprehend so much about the universe that, like, the pleasure that a normal human being would get from some nice flowers and a pleasant, breeze seems so tiny to almost, so small that it's not even worth considering. Why would you even offer this to me when I can perceive things beyond simple flowers or even feel the breeze on my face? I love that image.
Yeah, all I need to do is sit here in my room. The calm sounds of trepanation will serve as the background.
Yeah,
it's all the breeze I need. Yeah, but we'll get out to the balcony later because that's a real cool area.
It's super cool. Yeah. You kind of you head on back up to the lab after once you get down here, you open up a shortcut to kind of the main floor. You're introduced to these crawling patients, which look like the living torso from Todd Browning's Freaks. Like it's the same kind of shape, except that they have tentacles and the like, and they're aggressive puppers. Who can kind of hit you.
At some point here, we find a balcony outside that has a patient that is kind of ministering to a single gray sunflower. That is that is significant to later, but he is non-aggressive. These crawling guys are a real problem because they are much more nimble than you think they ought to be.
Yeah, for something without legs or arms, or with legs and arms like pinned to their side.
Yeah.
So getting up on the kind of patient rooms in rooms 2 and 4, we're introduced to the jar throwing patients, and a huge density of patients here. There's like a room with a ridiculous 3 jar throwing patients covering like a bunch of patients down at the bottom, which is that's a very gamey setup for these kind of mindless creatures to set up this ambush, which is kind of weird. But it's really tough. But we're introduced to the mini bosses here, Before that, actually, the living patients,
Yeah.
where the guys who are still alive and have not gone insane yet.
Yeah, they're pinned to the beds, and this is heartbreaking because they do everything from beg for mercy from Maria to grab their hand before they drown. Because again, all they can perceive is this water. They haven't made the adjustment. They haven't grown their sea legs, right? Up to like, I just want you to kill me.
Yeah, like so when you like think of the Souls games as like a tour of atrocities that have happened in the past, this one's up there because it's as opposed to just seeing the history of what happened, like you're seeing it happen. Like it does the thing where you see the corpses on tables and corpses everywhere, and that's nothing in Souls games. Like they're just corpses that have been defiled like left and right.
It's wallpaper.
It totally, like it just happens all the time, and you get kind of numb to it. And then to actually have active characters that are having this profound violence done upon them by the organization as we speak, is kind of new,
right?
Like there isn't a lot of space for like actual mercy in these games, like actually being able to stop somebody from being, this kind of the victim of black science. And I like that the game allows you to do that. And I think it adds some kind of emotional heft to this area.
It's no question that you should kill these people.
Oh yeah.
No question. And it's even like a little bit more heartbreaking because there's one of them who says, I know I did something wrong, but this seems a bit much.
I'm really curious about that. Is he referring to, like, what is he referring to? Is that something where like, they're being harvested, from like the criminal element?
Yeah. All I can think of is like, this is the Yharnam equivalent of being wished into the cornfield.
Or is he, was taken to the research hall and he was a hunter? At some point.
Are those effectively different?
I don't know.
I mean, just that gives us a little bit more specificity on the crime that they probably committed.
I guess that's true. Well, it depends on what he's referring to, because if he's referring to like the grand crime of the DLC, or he's referring to, the church kind of rounding people up for being petty pickpockets and stuff in order to do this stuff to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I got sent down to the cafeteria.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uderbrow. Or Uderbrow. Yeah, but we're introduced to the mini bosses here, which I really love. Which are the patients with the IV bag stand.
The transfusion stands.
Because the sounds they make are great.
Yeah, it's like a big clang.
Yeah.
I love the way Bloodborne uses sound design to intimidate you into being more scared of enemies than you should be. Because in reality, I find these guys pretty easy to counter and set up for a visceral attack. But they sound so horrific that you don't want to get anywhere near them.
Yeah, it's like the Chaos Eaters, like in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Make those unnerving noises and actually are real pussycats.
Yeah, but these guys are nothing to joke around with. I found, like, I kind of had trouble with them wherever they popped up.
Yeah, and they're tough. If you can get behind them, you're okay. That's the trick.
They're faster than kind of enemies of their size generally are, even in Bloodborne. I felt like
yeah, they're pretty quick. So you head up to the floors 5 and 6 kind of hub, heading up this curved staircase to where there's a doctor with a crank gun, just mowing down patients that rush him.
He's having way too much fun. Like he's just cackling away. Like, dude, this is a serious problem, and you're like just taking pleasure in killing all of these people. Really? Come on.
It's so weird that he laughs like that, because it's positioned like a siege, like it's a rare kind of like set piece thing. And I'm like, oh, is this, because if you forgive the DLC some timey-wiminess, because this definitely takes place not only in the past, but it's not really a snapshot of the past. We continue to move in the past. If this is kind of a mashup of things that have happened at the research hall in different points, I was like, oh, was there a point in which the patients actually rebelled? And that's what this is representing. But then it's the only piece of evidence for it. And he, cackles like an idiot. So I was like, oh, he's just crazy. And, everyone's crazed, it kind of took that away from me because I kept looking after I saw this, I kept looking for more evidence that like, something had happened. Like I was going to find one of the doctors strung up or something like that.
Yeah, it's a real tonal break, actually. And I don't think they needed to sell me on how sadistic the doctors were. I would much rather they be a more subdued kind of version of horrible.
But they already sold you.
Uh-huh.
It's not even so much they don't need to sell you. It's like they've sold you 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I suppose that's what I mean. It's ridiculous that they're taking it this way. Like, okay, well, just in case it didn't hit home, like, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's neat because he then turns his gun on you, and you can get behind him if you kind of take this secret passageway that you can get to. But otherwise, this is just a little set piece, and it's almost like they were waiting on their marks too.
Yeah.
Okay, here they come. And
yeah, it's a shuttle run. Like, yeah, there's a little secret elevator here that you can take to another little egg that gives you brain fluid that has really good dialogue too. The one that says like, "I'm a robin's egg. When am I going to be able to curl up and become an egg?" Which is obviously a Dark Souls 1,
Yep.
And Dark Souls 2 little callback. Like, I like this DLC. One of the like little telling tales out of school. For the third episode of the DLC, I toyed briefly with trying to get George Wiederman on the show, who does a YouTube channel I really like called Super Bunny Hop, and he likes the Souls games and everything. But I decided not to try to pursue him for the DLC because he doesn't like it, and one of the reasons he doesn't like it is for him these callbacks feel like kind of a dearth of ideas, but for me they have the opposite effect. Like, these little touches and everything are recalling the emotions, but they're not direct enough to where it's not like Ornstein showing up where they have to be addressed. They just recall the emotions of the earlier Souls games without defining them and without being explicit. So they really work for me. And how do you guys feel generally about the DLC and how many callbacks and how much it quotes kind of earlier areas in the series?
I mean, like you say, I think that it borrows a lot from earlier stuff thematically and kind of, trying to capture those moments emotionally, but it's still kind of carving out an identity all its own. Maria may mechanically have a lot of, similarities to Artorias, but that character stands alone. She is just as interesting as Artorias in her own right. And all of this stuff, I think, is fascinating in its own right. And I think, those little references, those little thematic mirror images are just, a little bit of spice to add in here. I don't think it damages the experience.
Yeah. This isn't like Taco Bell, where it's a whole bunch of different menu items that are just combinations of the same things over and over again. And the series has been quoting itself since the transition from Demon Souls to Dark Souls, and even beyond that, right? There are all these from hallmarks that are carried forward, and I see it kind of like what is it, like Amish friendship bread or whatever, where you use a starter from a previous set to start something new. Like, those elements are there, and I see them more as shorthand than fan service. And if anything, what is juxtaposed against, and kind of the different structural ways that they bring it to, or the different structural approaches they bring to a couple of those same ideas, it definitely does earn enough goodwill for me to say, like, okay, yeah, like, it's making me think about that same thing in a different way.
You heard it here first. Bloodborne is not Taco Bell. the bonfire side chat hot take.
I mean, is that dumb? Like,
no, totally makes sense. I just think it's just a funny as a standalone sentence. Like,
yeah,
Bloodborne, not Taco Bell.
Yeah, like, just like, hey, I'm a robin's egg. It makes sense for that thing. It's not, it's not out of context, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I don't get the sense that they designed those head enemies to resemble eggs just so they could do that thing. I think that it just kind of lined up.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. If a character suddenly said "Praise the sun" in this DLC, I would audibly groan. But that I just don't do that, and I think they are very, very clever and wise in their choices of references.
I mean, think about it like Volter, right? The fact that his design invokes or evokes rather the appearance of Solaire, right? And the fact that he is it's a cooperative kind of covenant. I see that as clever almost because they take that and he's a completely different character, and the purpose of that covenant is completely different as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works for me as a thing. Like I like it, and even if it's not strictly fan service, it does serve this other purpose. If it's fan service, it's subtle fan service done right in a way that just kind of works on me, and I don't feel shame about it.
Yeah, and I don't want it to come across like we're arguing with a person who's not here.
Oh no, not at all. Like it's just a different take, and like. I'm not putting George on blast. Like I like that dude a lot and would love to get him on for Dark Souls 3. And I think he's great. We just have different opinions about the Bloodborne DLC. Specific, like one part of this game we both really love. Not putting anybody on blast. It just it's interesting that this is a huge concentration of it in level design and these kind of little references.
Yeah. Specifically, I really enjoy how they're like, these people are making pleas to Lady Maria. Like it really sets up a, boss of 5-3. What's her name?
Estrella.
Yeah. A Lady Estrella kind of vibe to it as well.
Yeah. Who is explicitly like a Mary figure, like kind of a Maria, Mary, like that's all purposeful and makes sense for this.
Yeah.
You can wear one of these heads.
Yes, you can. In fact, the room where you go and get this, it is full of these. And I think that this is, for me, it was the only time they attacked. And boy, did that scare the shit out of me. Because you run into this room that is just full of these bags laying all over the floor and on these gurneys. And once you grab the head that is hollowed out so a madman can wear it, similar to like the Xanthus Jeremiah hat or what have you. Once you grab this, they come to life in a strictly survival horror beat. Like, okay, the room comes alive once you grab the candy, and they attack you with tentacles, which are not dangerous in and of themselves, but because it's an ambush, like it really stuck with me.
Yeah. It's a great scene. And just goofy headwear is what Fashion Souls is all about. And this game has a really great concentration of it, because we're going to get a really great helmet later from what's his head from Brador. You can wear some real stupid hats in Bloodborne. I like it. Bucket, bell. So you kind of make your way up, another set of stairs to the rafters to get up here. And there are crows and rats here.
No archers.
No archers, thankfully. But it is, again, I thought of Anor Londo because they're really thin rafters.
Yeah.
Like this is recalling a lot of Dark Souls stuff. And another patient that talks about water. But eventually you get to this lever in the middle that rotates the stairs and gives you access, kind of the further way through.
Yeah. So this kind of changes the chirality of the area and gives you access to new things, and opens up the path to the boss. There are a couple of different things you can get to on the descent. If you're like me, you're going to die on the ascent, and the descent. You're going to have to get to it on the ascent. So the order of this is going to be a little weird. Yeah.
So one thing this does is it Simon spawns again. By the lamp at the entrance of this area, and he talks about this is the bloody face of the church, and it's not pretty, and says that to climb the astral clock tower and kill Maria, who hides the real secret.
I love that sentence.
Astral clock tower.
Yep.
Like it.
It's such a Castlevania touch.
Yeah. When we were doing the live stream, people in the chat, when we were doing the duck stream rather, people in the chat were like, do you mind if I spoil a boss name for you in the DLC? And I was like, it's fine. And they're like, Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower.
I was there for that.
Oh yes. Oh baby, that's good.
Yep. Waiting for the skeleton words.
Yeah, exactly. Super good.
Yeah. No, I'm totally down with just that sentence, just that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
We already talked about Adeline, but we didn't mention her story. If you look at these different item descriptions for the brain goo, then you get some background. One of which talks about a young girl who had a brother who wanted to be a doctor, so she offered herself up as a patient for kind of his experiments, and this sped their encounter with the cosmic truth.
Mm.
I don't know who that young girl was. I don't know if that was Adeline or not, but boy, is that, like, again, underlining the fairy tale nature of this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, just anybody can do it. You know, like, if just amateur doctors can just find this cosmic truth, like, it's common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an item that you can get that, again, changes your playstyle here. You can go to this small little platform that gets you the lock shield, lake shield, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of made of this blue glass and was made specifically to protect churchgoers or the church officials during their rituals. Which, like, why do you need protection from arcane stuff during your rituals? That's pretty weird. And also as a protective gear for people who are exploring eyes. Like, eyes is specifically called out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But this is a shield, and it will absorb physical damage, even though it is mostly for soaking spells.
Yeah, it's best at soaking spells and elemental damage, and it's supposed to be really great. And I didn't get it before the next boss, which it would have been helpful during it, is my understanding. You also can find the underground cell key, which gets you down to the basement. That's where we're going to go meet Bradar, but we're going to do that next episode.
Yeah,
I think when we go back and kind of do the wrap up. Yeah, and you head up into the balcony towards this first boss, and we find a patient who is begging for forgiveness from Maria because she failed. It kind of, everyone you talk to who mentions Maria kind of paints this tone where they're definitely reverent, but do you get the sense that, like, it's not reverent exactly in the same way that Estrella is, even though I think that's clearly kind of what they're going for as far as a quote. But what's Maria doing for these people? You know, like, what is that? Was she actually helping them at any point? Or did some of them just kind of become so water-addled that, you know, they're just kind of, you know, they're kittens, like they're brainwashed, or...
I think there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome happening here. Yeah. I mean, clearly what's happened to them is horrific, so I don't think they actually idolize Maria, but I think at a certain point when you're lost in a sea of thought, you kind of need that support from the one person who's still got their sanity.
I kind of wonder if there's any difference between people who were believers and went through this, and people who were non-believers and were brought here against their will. This notion of I failed to do what? My guess is that she failed to transcend. Yeah. Like, oh, no matter what happens, I've paid this dear price, you know, physically, but I can't hear it. I can't hear the voice of God. Like, my conversion was incomplete, and there's just this emptiness. And, you know, Maria as this authority figure, as this representative for the church, this jailmaster and headmaster alike, you know, like, I can't contribute to your cause because something in me is broken.
Well, and then you think about what the cause is, whether these are just science experiments where the idea is they want one of the patients to actually transcend, or are these the kind of dream equivalent of the Garden of Eyes? You know, where they're growing eyes in their head, and eventually, you know, are going to be harvested. We find one that's hollowed out, you know, and that has kind of echoes of something that's going to happen in the next area, where none of these people are above literally just kind of looking inside the jack-o'-lantern for whatever's, you know, for eyeballs that are in there. Yeah. And the fact that when I mentioned Garden of Eyes, like, these guys kind of cut a similar silhouette to the Garden of Eyes that you find in Bergenworth.
Yeah. Specifically, so the insect guys with the 27 eyes.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting. I don't, you know, it's obviously black science, and it's obviously you know, doing terrible things to these people, but is it, you know, they want one of them to succeed so they know how to do it, or is this literally just, we need eyes?
She could also be sorry because, you know, by failing to transcend, she hasn't grown eyes. Like, she can't provide this resource to the church.
Yeah.
You know? Like these are people who have donated their living bodies to provide resources for the church, and she has not lived up to expectations. She didn't produce.
Yeah, it's very sad. Regardless,
Yeah.
Like, so before we head up to the bosses, we can head down to the balcony, as we mentioned, because Maria gives this key to Adeline, as we talked about, and opening up the balcony opens up the courtyard, which is the dream equivalent of the Lumenflower Garden. Which has the same kind of layout and everything, and has these patients kind of working to harvest.
Yeah, this gigantic field of these gray sunflowers, stretching out. Gary, this must be terrifying to you.
It's not as terrifying as the giant ones that we run into. Like those things are those move, and they're huge. Like they look like they are to swallow a man. Like they are made what to swallow a man. Like you're just gonna step in the middle of one and you're just gonna pull back a skeleton foot. Like that's what those
like in sorcery.
Like. Yeah, it's disgusting. Those things are disgusting. It's the grossest thing in this game about pulling eyeballs out of scraping the inside of people's skulls for eyeballs. Those sunflowers are the grossest thing.
We've said it before. A sunflower with a bee on it, pure terror.
Yeah, it is. It is the worst. Get rid of all sunflowers.
Get rid of all bees.
I mean, I guess I like sunflower seeds.
Oh yeah,
but
we can simulate those.
Man, I've never thought about eating sunflower seeds and having a sunflowers grow in my stomach.
Oh,
and I just ruined sunflower seeds.
Gary, your salads are never going to be the same.
Yeah, my salads are ruined. Balsamic nightmare be this.
What's funny is these harvesters are nonviolent. They're just down there, just ripping these things out. And again, we found that this lumen wood and these lumen flowers are the fertilizer bed for these phantasms, which we're going to see those much later. But they don't aggro until you approach.
Yes, and when they aggro big time. Like I think this is one of the harder combat encounters in the game. I've never cleared this out. I just go in, get my treasure, and run the fuck away.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, because it is they do tons of damage. Using the spell that's why you're here, is to get the Black Sky Eye, which is great.
Yeah, this is like gives you a soul arrow.
Yeah, this is the magic missile that Bloodborne has been missing. Does way better damage than the Executioner's Gloves. Better range, more predictable trajectory, and just costs one bullet. This thing's great, and it makes me kind of want to play through the game as an arcane build so I can be like a broccoli-headed magic missile thrower.
Nice.
With a heartful palm.
And it just kind of... it just kind of sucks that this is so far, so deep into the game. And the requirement, the arcane requirement, is very low. Like it's like 16. Like that is reasonable to get there, and it scales at an S. So you're going to do a lot of damage with it, even at the minimum requirement.
It's the same thing with all the DLC weapons and playstyles, where it just kind of sucks that they're DLC gated. Like just having to be you had to get that far in the game. Like Amelia's not that far in the game, but you had to be able to get. Like you had to be able to beat, Ludwig. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
Doing that as soon as you can beat Amelia, and even beating Amelia as soon as you run into Amelia is hard. So. Yeah.
But yeah, this Black Sky Eye, it is an eye that has been blessed by a phantasm, and if you look into the black of it, there's a whole like a night sky within it with meteor storms.
Yep. Yeah. I'm possibly just because I have Bowie on the brain, I just keep thinking of Black Star. The most Bloodborne music video that's ever been. Which, like, for real, we need to figure out a way to do a Teenage Dirtbags crossover, or Bonfire Side Teenage Dirtbags crossover for Black Sky.
Man, have me on.
Yeah, because that is, or Black Star, because that is that. Have you watched that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching all the videos that come up in the wake of his passing. Josh,
have you seen that, Josh?
No, I haven't. I'll have to look it up after this podcast. Yeah.
It's the most like Souls-like music video I've ever seen. Like just the iconography and everything. It's very creepy in a similar way, and has lots of kind of visual similarities to Bloodborne. I'm sure it's not a reference, but like visual similarities.
Yeah, they could be cribbing from very similar source material or reference. Yeah.
After you leave here, you have got a note here. Inside that chest, I think, is a blood rock.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that is tough to get to. If you go through the window, you get back to the church again. Oh shit, that's where Amelia was. Yeah, yeah. Okay, there we go. That all makes sense. Yeah, that's totally Maria or Amelia.
Yeah.
Huh, cool. All right. Yeah, but you have to make a hop over a gap, and boy, is the consequence for failure on that kind of annoying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to go all the way back around. But if you go back to the main research hall and head up all the spiral staircases past the lady who is apologizing to Maria for being a failure, you meet the first boss of this area that we're going to talk about, the living failures. Which is my favorite boss name.
Yep.
As far as, I mean, not for cool factor, for goof factor.
Definitely. This is great. From a thematic standpoint. So you walk out, and there's this gigantic pillar of lumenwood flowers that is kind of arranged like a crucifix, like a cross that we've seen so many of these beasts kind of hung upon. And there's a gigantic one that kind of lolls to follow you. But that is not the primary point of interest here. It is these kind of shambling golems that are rushing to attack you. I think there's just like one at the start, or maybe two. But as you fight and as this progresses, they kind of climb up from the lumenwood and start attacking you. So it kind of escalates a little bit like a lot of these kind of gang fights do. There were more of those in Dark Souls too, but like it's a little bit like Four Kingsy. The way that it escalates. Yeah.
I mean, that said, I think this is probably the most successful implementation of one of these gang fights, because usually these are a low point in the Souls games for me, just because I get overwhelmed and I can't deal with so many enemies attacking me at once. But I liked how they gave the golems kind of roles. So you have two melee golems and two ranged ones, and because they're so slow in their movements, it gives you enough time to react to their attacks and kind of counter them and stuff like that. So while it is challenging, I never felt like I was beyond my means. I was still, right there in the fight, and and I ended up having a lot of fun with this battle.
I don't. This is going on the weird list of thought to be very easy fights that I had a hard time with, because I couldn't for the life of me avoid their cosmic attack. I ended up dying against this a lot because I knew that I was like, okay, I need to hide behind the tree, but it would still just kind of end up striking me, kind of no matter what. And I didn't get the shield, which I imagine that shield is very useful for this, but I did not end up getting it. So I would just do the fight, and it would be like the actual fight is not actually that hard, but the cosmic attack just does a lot of damage, and you can get kind of hit 2 or 3 times.
That cosmic attack is like being on the other side of a Final Fantasy summon.
It's exactly that. Yeah, it's Sephiroth attack like. But I love when they all stop to do it and all raise their hands. That's an amazing image. And then it just the sky turns into Medio. I had a really hard time dodging that. The really obvious thing that we haven't mentioned is that this is obviously a reference to the Celestial Emissary fight. So are the Celestial Emissaries the successful implementation?
Man,
I think so. Yeah.
And then these are.
So, yeah.
Bear that out, both of you. I want to hear more.
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry to cut you off.
I think these guys kind of function the same way Ornstein does in Dark Souls 2, where their pathetic nature, the way they move, the slow movement, and kind of just everything about them is designed to make you feel kind of pity in the same way that in isolation, Ornstein seems so pathetic when outside of the context of the original Ornstein and Smo battle. It's meant to make you feel the power of that the boss fight with the Celestial Emissary in the main game. At least that's what I think was the intention.
I ended up having a much harder time with these guys than Celestial Emissary. And that could be me. So if the idea of, like, it's just kind of weird that they're the failure versions if they end up being the easier, kind of versions of it, or the harder versions rather. At least for me. But the idea that, like, because we don't really know when this is supposed to be, we just kind of know where it's supposed to be. So, and I get the sense that it is in the past. So I think this is the same kind of location, or the same idea. It's not the same location because we've been down to the where you fight the Celestial Emissary in this, but it's the same kind of idea. And these are, the failed versions in the past of this same thing. And then we end up fighting the Celestial Emissaries, which are the actual, kind of our way to make a version of one of these, old ones or what have you.
Yeah.
Or kind of outer beings.
They look so similar to the previous patients that we fought. I initially thought, like, oh, I don't remember them having heads. They kind of look like they're headless versions. So it could be the remaining bodies of the people whose heads fled them. And just, if left to their own devices and kind of raised up to be these, these brutes. That's actually kind of a really fun kind of commentary on, like, the divine and the separation of the soul and the head and the body, which is, this left over as the remnants. However, they do have what appear to be heads, so maybe these failures, like, say, Maria, oh, I've failed. Maybe that proximity is meant to say, like, those of these that do not, separate and get this enlightenment and hear the water in this kind of cruder previous version of this ritual turn into these. And this is what we have. This is what results before the choir really perfects the process to make what we have seen as the Celestials that we fought before. Like, I don't know where this is in relationship to, well, it's definitely above where we fought Abritus, on the Z-axis or what have you. But yeah, this feels like kind of a more primal version of what we ultimately see the choir accomplish. Yeah, regardless of where these guys come from, like, this gives me kind of some fits too. Like, it's more difficult than it seems it ought to be. And let me know, like, so the melee ones gave me more trouble than the casters, just because of their that they have a similarly kind of long combo when compared to the patients.
It's not just a long combo, but Bloodborne has a thing about so many enemies having attacks that hit in a 360-degree arc around them. Like, they don't want you to just get behind enemies in Bloodborne. So they have a lot of sweeping attacks that go behind them.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up kind of tripping me up.
Yeah.
But they're actually, once I kind of, started trying to visceral attack them, I ended up kind of finding the timing for it, but it took me a couple tries and a couple deaths. Like, spoiler, like, the next boss fight, which I think is probably objectively harder, I beat on the first try by a sliver. This took me several tries, and I think most people would think this is a much easier boss fight than the next one. So,
yeah. But yeah, you clear these guys out, and you're left with this just delightful room to run through.
Yeah, with a big scare, and the sunflowers in the middle don't stop moving.
Nope.
They will continually sway in a nauseating waltz for eternity.
Oh man, which is scarier, Gary, Amnesia or Plants vs. Zombies?
Amnesia.
Okay.
Yeah. The plants are, for some reason, the sunflowers and Plants vs. Zombies are cute. They sing that ending song. Like, I'm way into like a cartoon sunflower.
Oh man. After you kill these guys, you're given access to the to the clock tower that has kind of been looming over you this whole time. You can never tell with the Bloodborne skyline like which is the building you're running to. I think that's a little bit of a problem with the design of Yharnam like areas. Like I'm not sure if this is where I'm going.
I was looking. I last time I played, I took out the monocular and looked at the building to see if there were distinguishing kind of marks on it, and there aren't. Like it just looks like Bloodborne biome number 412 or whatever.
Yeah.
As far as the architecture goes. Yeah. Which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. But, and there's nothing really in the description of the key to give you any information about what happens here, aside from the fact that this isn't just a clock that marks the passage of time. This is a star interpreting clock, and it confirms that this is the Grand Cathedral.
Yes. Yeah. So you head in here and you see a corpse in a chair that kind of looks like the doll, even though her chin is down. Next to her is a shattered picture and a cup full of what looks like blood. And there's blood kind of everywhere, and it looks like it is a dead lady.
Yeah, it appears as though she was like Shake in that one episode with the haunted Atari game. It's like she took poison and then cut her throat.
Yeah. Yep. And then when you go up to her, it says inspect corpse. But when you do so, she grabs your hand in an amazing moment.
Again, the idea that you are reaching beyond your grasp here.
Yes.
Like you are looking for secrets, and this is dangerous to you. And the only cure for your kind of curiosity is the sweet, sweet release of death, which she is more than happy to provide as one of the most, like to me, like one of the most difficult fights in the game, but also one of the most satisfying duels in the series. This boss, Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower.
Yeah, this is this is my favorite boss fight in Bloodborne.
I was going to say, she's definitely my favorite boss in the game, but also just the entire series. I mean, Artorias probably edges her just slightly, but she's dangerously close to being perfect as a boss fight. I can't think of a single move that she does that feels cheap in the same way Gehrman's kind of automatic visceral attacks do. It feels like everything she does can be countered. There's a strategy for everything, but she's still tough. She's still a match for you, and it's an exhilarating.
I agree with you, and it may be it's
definitely one of the
Artorias
highlights
for me,
of the
and
entire
I love the
series.
Artorias fight so much. One of the things that Bloodborne boss fights do that I think is kind of a mixed bag is so many of them have multiple phases. Where it becomes, you go into a boss fight and you memorize 6 moves, and it's like you think you're rewarded and you can beat that boss, but then what happens is they just switch to another phase and now you have to memorize another 6, and it just kind of at some point just feels like, okay, like you're definitely not going to make it the first time because they're going to be really hard and you're not going to know the moves. But you're definitely not going to make it the second time because the second time you're going to get to the second phase and they're going to have another set of moves you don't have memorized. I think that's kind of a bummer. The difference, though, with Maria is she has 3 phases, but all of her moves are telegraphed better. And so many of them are extensions of moves that she already had to where your previous knowledge is not useless. You can, and it's part of that just human anatomy. With like a Bretus or something like that, where you fight a Bretus and a Bretus starts doing new moves like, I can't tell heads or tails from a Bretus, or if you're fighting, the Blood-Starved Beast, which is just a bunch of flappy skin and particle effects and like just a collection. It's like that Onion story where it's like Steven Tyler is just an animate pile of rags and scarves, like or Johnny Depp. That's what the Blood-Starved Beast fight is like, or those fights where it's like just a bunch of it's really hard to kind of predict, whereas every new move that Maria gets feels like an extension of an old move. So your previous knowledge is still useful. In my mind, it's the most successful kind of phased boss fight. in this game at least, if not the series.
It's definitely these subtle iterations that work, and it feels like she's adapting to you. It feels like she is tapping into some kind of power she's been afraid to use up to that point.
By cutting her throat.
Yes.
By like bleeding herself out, which is awesome.
Yeah, and if you look at her gear and her drops, there's actually kind of a bit of a lore note. She doesn't like using blood. Like she is unlike the other hunters in that she doesn't rely on that. So she is kind of compromising you to protect this secret that she has kind of been set to guard in this, kind of almost like Rom-like role within the lore. Like acting as this bulwark against the deepest, darkest secret of the church and of the hunters, right?
Well, you get the sense that she's repentant too. Like it's a secret should be left well alone. Like it is stop digging. You don't want to be here. And you get the sense that it's not just like she's protecting the church because she's working for the church. Like you get the sense of genuine guilt, partly because where you find her weapon, they say how she cast it away in disgust when we find her weapon later. But like it's a genuinely redemptive arc in a story about black science, like a story that is all people doing terrible things in pursuit of misguided science. This is like somebody who's genuinely repentant and is trying to stop you from, essentially kind of making the same mistakes. Like it casts, kind of what you're doing in the next area as following in the footsteps of people who have committed heinous crimes,
right?
And doing the same thing, reenacting that. It just really works as kind of like, this game does not have moral kind of anchor points. Like nobody's okay in Bloodborne. Like nobody's okay. And the DLC really goes like, if you thought Willem was the lesser of two evils, he's not. Like, Bergenworth is the worst. And they, have done terrible things as well. Like there's no good and bad. But if there's going to be a character who has kind of a redemptive side, it's Maria, who has clearly killed herself out of guilt.
Yeah.
When you run here, or attempted to. And I don't know if it's like dream logic or what have you that allows her to.
I like that the dream has kept her alive, and the more violence that she does to herself, the more effective she becomes at this thing she obviously doesn't want to be anymore.
Because she's repentant, and this whole the hunter's nightmare is a nightmare for hunters. Like it is, the whole thing is a punishment. So this idea that she can't actually, be dead, but her signs when you come up on her body, like they're signs of suicide. Like it's not, it's not like she died from something else. Like she is a genuinely repentant and kind of good character in this, or the closest we've come to it, and that gives you more shades of kind of Artorias, where Artorias, kind of set himself up as this anchor to the abyss, and this kind of plug. Like, it's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like you can get the sense that she's here because we don't need to do anything else to the fishing village. Like this was terrible. Let's leave that alone.
Yeah.
Stop. Stop this pursuit of black science in, for no other reason other than this kind of, this knowledge or this pursuit of this eyes on the inside, this insane idea of insight.
Yeah.
You're just committing awful crimes. Like I said it when we did the wrap up episode, but like as far as being morally, darker than wet black velvet, like Bloodborne, like there are no good guys in Bloodborne. Like, and the DLC just underlines that 1,000 times. Like these are bad people who have done terrible things exclusively.
I love the design of the way she looks when you're fighting her, because especially in the later phases of her fight, as she is, slitting her throat and using this blood to attack you and kind of augment even like the reach of her attacks, either to attack at range or to make her sword longer. Like everything kind of cuts these glyphs in the air. In this striking red. It's like she is writing the song of your destruction in carol runes, as a last gasp effort to stop you.
Yeah. It's we haven't talked very much about the fight. What happens. So it's a 3-phased fight. The first phase is very similar to a hunter duel in the game, where she doesn't have that much in the way of a moveset outside of what you can do. She does. There are a couple things she can do, a couple of charges, but not that much. And then as she kind of draws blood from herself, she becomes more powerful and gains kind kind of fire powers, like gains the ability to do things with fire, which is really strange. But it just kind of steps up. It is a phased fight.
Yeah, it's a phase fight, and it's a testament, I think, to how well balanced it is. That when you first took this on, did you know that this was going to be a fight? Like, did you go back and spend your stuff? Did you replenish it all between the Living Failures and Maria?
I did. I knew it was going to be a fight because there was somebody sitting in a room. Like it's right after a boss fight, but it's also under one that like I was like I had a hard time with that, but I don't think I'm supposed to be that hard.
Yeah, but the fact that you beat her on the first try in this battle of wits and skill and whatnot, and it was right down to the last hair. It does feel very well balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's down to the fact that the animation for Maria is so good. Like, you talked about her design, but I think just the way she moves, it's counter to a lot of the beast fights, which Gary's talked about a lot during the series, that it's very hard to see what they're doing, and that's partly because of all the particle effects, but it's also just that their animations aren't very distinct, especially with Ludwig's first phase. He's got so many limbs coming off of him and doing all sorts of things. It's so easy to get distracted and not look at the part of him that's telling you when he's going to do an attack. Whereas with this boss fight, every attack is flagged with a distinct, unique animation that is only ever for that attack. So you are under no illusion as to what she's going to do at any given time.
Yeah, I also feel like the arena for this fight is to the battle's credit.
Yeah,
it's reminiscent to me of False King Allant from Demon's Souls.
Hmm.
Just in terms of how much space it gives you. Like, they really want it to just be you and her, to not have anything else get in your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real classic duel. That, I'm watching a video of it now, and I was talking about her doing fire, and it actually just kind of looks like this could be just a weird blood energy.
Yeah, I was going to say,
if it's not fire. Like, it's definitely not just blood, because she does shoot blood, but she also has attacks where, like, particle effects come off of the blood in a way that is
plasma.
Yeah, like it looks like a different thing. But it is just a you versus somebody with not that dissimilar of a move set. That each new move that she learns builds off of former moves that she had. Like this is why I love fighting in Souls games. Is because of fights like this. Like, it is, a perfect arena and a perfect. It's also like emotionally resonant once you kind of figure out the doll connection, and everything with her, which I really love. Like this, and we've talked about that before. But after you eventually beat her, just real quick, God, do I wish that there were the things that that allow you to reignite a bonfire in Dark Souls 2. Like, I would love to be able to fight her again without going through the whole DLC again.
Yeah.
And just do the fight. Bonfire aesthetics. Like, boy, do I wish there were like lamp oil, athletes or something like that you burn. Like something that allows you to do these fights again. But yeah, it is it's incredible. And figuring out the kind of connection to the doll and the way that Gurman thinks of the doll versus how he thought of Maria. And kind of the lore is really interesting.
Yes.
The connection with the doll we should probably kind of talk about.
We should. So their design is not similar by coincidence. It is very much intentional on Gehrman's part. If you believe that Gehrman was the person who constructed the doll out of this mania for kind of trying to get Maria back, whether that was romantic or whether that was out of kind of reverence for what she kind of did for the art of hunting. Like the old hunter's bone, it's probably hers. It's probably some piece of her, because the quick stepping, she does that without having to activate it, unlike even Gehrman himself, who is using this. And the fact that you find the old hunter's bone at her grave in the real world, where the doll will occasionally mourn, And also that is the tombstone that you use to get to the DLC. Like, she is very much a linchpin that goes through all three worlds in this one particular place and way.
Because the bone refers to like a male kind of apprentice of Gurman, but it's a translation thing.
Yeah.
The most, like, Vadi did a video where he talked about the differences in translation and the things that are lost in translation in Bloodborne. So I think that was always meant to, if they had translated it properly, it would have referred to a lady, and we would have kind of learned, saw that connection maybe a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
She's got a really swag outfit. It's the outfit I like to wear in the game.
I also really awesome. I also really love how this connection kind of characterizes Gurman. Before, when you heard the comment about you could use the doll if you wish, it kind of came off as a slightly weird tone for Bloodborne to go into. But now, with the context of Maria, it really feels just like an indictment of Gurman as a person, that he would take this, glorious warrior, and then his projection of her is this infantilized, subservient, kind of, passive character in the hunter's dream. And his just view of women. Am I saying that Gurman's like an MRI activist or something? I don't know. Does he go on like anti-feminist blogs in between hunts or something? I don't know. But just it instead of it just being this creepy note at the beginning, it really feels like a piece of characterization. And Gurman ends up looking quite awful at the end of this DLC.
Yeah, absolutely. Like 100%. Like it is it changes it's Souls doesn't really traffic an outright villain, so you're always going to have a little bit of sympathy. Yeah. And you can, if you, in a charitable read of Gurman with this, is this idea that like this was somebody who is dear to him, that he tried to make that he lost and tried to make a facsimile of, and the uncanny valley was too much. So when he's like a disgusting creeper when we meet him and doesn't pay any attention to the doll, like it's there, but they never interact. It is after like, who knows how long of kind of disillusionment with this ersatz version, and that's kind of a sympathetic read for his lechery, creepy nastiness. But it is this kind of this idea of like trying to make a simulacrum of somebody dear to you and it not working out, and especially like it just contextualizes that, because it was always creepy, but that kind of disgust he has, the depth of disgust that he has to be in comparison to something. Like him saying, use the doll. Like that's vile. It's not just perverted. There's hate in that. And that hate is because he's disgusted with this creation compared to this person who was probably dear to him.
It takes what was once this kind of really base degradation and turns it into this really profound degradation. When you see the glory of what Maria once was compared to what he ultimately turned her into, and it really just depends. There's no text that I can find either way that says, hey, he did this on purpose, or this is just the nature of the ritual that he performed to do this. In the real world, right, it is just a doll. Like he put this together, with a lock of her hair and her hairpin just to have something back like that. There's nothing that animates it that we can see. But in the nightmare, in the dream rather, as it was kind of sucked in from the real world itself, you have to have insight to see her get up and move around. Otherwise, she's just inanimate and is not. You can't interact with her. So there's something about the transition to the dream that imbued her, with the characteristics of Maria, and the interaction between the dream and the nightmare is such that after you kill Maria and you talk to the doll, she notices a change. She feels untethered from something that was kind of holding her back. It's this liberation from heavy shackles. That she can't quite characterize, and seems relieved that it has happened, but that alludes to the idea that she doesn't know, that the doll doesn't know about this connection to this previous person. She sees herself as this new entity, which might be what Gehrman resents.
Yeah, I think that's the 100% what he resents. Like
Yeah.
this sentience, and also like when you think about how kind of matronly the doll is and how motherly it is versus Maria, which by all accounts is like, I mean, she's kind of seen as a mother figure by the people in the research hall, but she's also like a really fierce warrior, and has this kind of genuine repentance that came from what they did in the fishing village, the area we're talking about in the next episode. So much that she like disarms herself. It's just kind of like when you weird science somebody like that, you can't make the complex, like boil down the complexity of a person, like that, and that's what the kind of disgust that Gurman has to come from guilt, in a way, and I think that's what is getting kind of put across.
Does that read for you, Josh? Like, does any of that ring true?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I think Gurman is just completely disgusted with what he's created, and it speaks a lot about him as a person that he would create a person like that.
Yeah, it's really good. Like it is a really good boss fight.
Yeah.
And it's satisfying in every way that a Souls game boss fight can be. Like it's satisfying mechanically. It's got like a really satisfying story to it. It's a really great character.
Yeah.
It's also one of the only characters who is genuinely repentant, and not just because of the punishment, that is inflicted upon them. Like it is, if you're searching for someone to root for in Bloodborne, like Maria is your candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because there was nothing of her in the previous, in the main body of the game. So this is desperately needed context.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then so after that, I mean, we're going to get into going into the actual the Celestial Dial here and heading into the next area in the next episode, and also do that kind of backtracking to look at the stuff we missed in the cells under the church and Lawrence and stuff. But yeah, until then, I think that we're probably... Do we have any kind of wrap-up thoughts on the stuff we've covered today?
Josh, I'll defer to you.
No, I think we've covered it.
Mm-hmm. It's if Bonfire Side Chat, nothing if not exhaustive. We got it. But this is my favorite boss fight in Bloodborne by far.
Yeah,
and like I'm so... Boy, the DLC is good. I'm looking forward to the next episode as well.
Me too.
Josh, can you let people know where they can find you online?
Yes, if you're looking for me on Twitter, you can find me at Combine Hunter. You can also find my podcast, Kane and Rinse, kaneandrinse.com, where we take a game or a series of game, dissect them in detail, and you'll also find some articles and videos on there as well.
Yeah.
Recommended.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for, if you have anything to say about the DLC, we'll probably be recording about a week from when this comes out. So
this will release about a week from when this comes out. We'll be recording a couple days after this comes out.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah. So if you when you hear this, send in your stuff.
Yes.
So that's kind of your last opportunity, and stuff for the entire DLC. We've got a lot of responses, so try to keep it unique and relatively brief. 2 paragraphs is a good kind of benchmark.
Yep.
For that. But yeah, please send those in.
Yes, and please understand if we edit them.
Absolutely. Yeah. As far as other things you can do for the show, ratings and reviews on iTunes are always appreciated. You can head to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. If you want to kick us a couple bucks a month, get episodes a day early, and join us on our message board, our Slack board, and the like. Super fun.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about what's going on in the off season?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So we got a real grab bag going on. We've always tried to tie these together by theme because we're dorks. That's not really necessary, but we just like organization. This is some of our weakest theming, I think.
This is stuff we want to play.
Yeah, it's stuff we want to play that is related.
Yeah,
so
and stuff we want to cover, because, to be honest, covering Brotherhood of the Wolf and the Lovecraft stuff gave me a bit of a bug.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. It's some kind of related stuff. So our next season, which is just kind of the bonfire side grab bag, the meat of it is we're going to cover both Shadow Tower games. Shadow Tower and Shadow Tower Abyss.
Yep. So Shadow Tower 1, that is available on the PSN store for a very reasonable cost. Shadow Tower Abyss never came out in the West, I believe. Maybe it came out in Europe, but there is a translation patch available that you can apply and play at a PS2 emulator, which is getting easier and easier to do.
Which we're going to do, and then for the record, we don't condone piracy.
Nope.
When things are not we would pay money if we could.
Yep.
So if you can't pay money for the thing to play it, that's kind of a gray area that we'll live in. So those are kind of the meaty big episodes that are From Software stuff. In addition, we've got a couple of movies that we're going to cover, some stuff. But what's the first thing we're covering after the DLC?
Well, to relate it to the Fishing Hamlet, we're going to be covering Uzumaki, the Junji Ito manga, and that's going to be a split EP with some coverage of The Shadow over Innsmouth. Yeah,
which are kind of two, pretty to me at least, kind of clear reference points for the Fishing Village. So it's kind of a mix of games and other media for the season.
Yep.
It's we'll make more announcements as we go. But we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll solidify kind of the running order of those as well. But that is not that is not the extent of it. We just want to let people know what to prepare for and to start on Shadow Tower.
Yes, yeah. If you want to play along with us, because we'll definitely be doing appendix episodes for both Shadow Tower games. So we want to hear what you have to say. And I for one, am really looking forward to dipping back in, because any opportunity to do free pre-souls From Software stuff is always kind of fun once you get your sea legs. I will say that Shadow Tower opens with your character on an incredibly narrow bridge, and if you're pressing buttons, as soon as you press the strafe button, you fall into a pit. So it's a recall. It's the lava pit from Ancient City kind of thing.
Yeah.
So looking forward to getting my sea legs as far as Shadow Tower goes.
Yeah. Cool. I believe that is just about everything. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back next week with coverage of the Fishing Village.
Yes, and we have the guest line in advance. We'll be joined by Lobos.
Yeah.
Mike Villalobos Jr., to talk about that, who recently went through and fought all the DLC enemies with just his hands.
God.
With no weapons. Because he is a patience elemental, and that is why we wanted to get him for one of the harder bosses in the game and kind of talk about his experience with the DLC.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on the podcast, but I genuinely consider you two to be among the best podcasters out there. So it's a huge honor for me to be on this podcast.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and hopefully, assuming we don't all die from a meteor or anything, when Dark Souls 3 comes out, hopefully you'll come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic.
All right. So everybody, have a great week. And I do not have a sign-off besides plip, plop, plip.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
I got a sign-off, Cole. Ask me what we should do until next time.
Gary, what should we do until next time?
We should leave corpses alone.
That's what the judge said. Umbasa.
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 And we all pray that we will have far more soon